Hello, this is Mrs. G's Story Time, and we are reading the last chapter of The Tanglewoods Secret by Patricia Sanjan, by permission of Moody Publishing Company. Chapter 20, A Perfect Christmas. It was Christmas evening. We had such a happy day that I kept having to stop and tell myself that it was all really true. Mom and Dad had arrived just a fortnight before, and Philip and I had missed school and gone to Liverpool with Uncle Peter to meet the boat. We had gone on an escalator, and we had stayed in a hotel where we had chicken and coffee ice cream for supper, and we had gone up to bed in a lift, which is an elevator, and the lift man had let Philip work it. And then we had been awakened early and gone down to Merseyside, which is a river, in a wet, windy dawn. We had watched the passengers streaming down the gangway of the great liner, and Uncle Peter had suddenly said in quite a quiet voice, "Here they come." And there were Mom and Dad showing their passports at the barrier. Philip, absolutely trustworthy and joyful, flung himself straight into Dad's arms and then turned to Mom and hugged the hat right off of her head. But I stood still because I wanted to be quite sure of everything first. When Mom ran towards me, I looked up into her face and suddenly knew that I had found something I'd been wanting all these years without knowing it. I was so amazed by it all that I just went on staring up at her, and she didn't hurry me. She waited, looking down at me until I was ready and held out my arms to kiss her. Then she bent down and put her arms around me. And there on the quarry side, with the rain falling and the crowds jostling and the foghorns wailing, she told me in a whisper how much she loved me. I made up my mind there and then that I was never going to be parted from her again. With one hand in Mom's and one in Dad's, and with Philip prancing around us like an excited puppy, we made our way back to the hotel, had kippers and toast and marmalade for breakfast, and nearly missed the train home. Now it was Christmas evening, and the great moment of the day was approaching. We had opened our stockings and had been to church and eaten Christmas pudding until we all felt as if we would burst. We had been on a walk in the hills in the afternoon with Dad and Uncle Peter and had come back as hungry as ever. We had had tea by candlelight, and Dad had cut the cake with his Indian dagger, and we all pulled firecrackers. Little Minnie, one of the London children, didn't like the bangs and had been carried off screaming and fed chocolate biscuits in the kitchen by Terry's mom, whom she adored. Now Auntie's saying, "Run away for 5 minutes, children," and Mom was saying, "Go into the kitchen and see how Minnie is getting along." Philip pinched us all in turns and said, "Come on, everybody, now's our chance." When the lounge door was safely shut on the grown-ups, we slipped on our coats and tiptoed out the front door. The world was quite silent, and the starlight lay silver on the snow. Philip looked hard at us and hummed the note, and then we all threw back our heads and started singing the carol we had learned to sing to the grown-ups. While I was singing, I kept thinking that the baby Jesus was now my shepherd, who was going to look after me day and night and carry me home someday to where Terry was. I knew that I was perfectly safe forever and ever. And when the carol was over, Alfie hammered excitingly at the door. It was flung open, and there in the hall, under the mistletoe and the holly, were Mom and Auntie in paper hats, and Dad and Uncle pretending they didn't know it was us, and Terry's mother with tears in her eyes, and little Minnie clasped tightly in her arms. We flung ourselves wildly upon them. "Did you like it?" we shouted. "Did you really think it wasn't us?" We tumbled inside, took off our coats, and gathered around the Christmas tree, which we dug up from the Cowley woods. It was now beautifully decorated. The candles were alight and shed a rosy glow over the room. It was so pretty that we stopped shouting and sat down quietly, cross-legged on the floor, while Dad started giving out the presents. The little Londoners were thrilled with their gifts, and soon it was our turn. Dad took a square parcel from the pile at the bottom of the tree and handed it to Philip. "Open it carefully, Phil," he warned. "It's very fragile." Philip annoyed me by taking such a long time over unwrapping, but he always liked to make his pleasures last as long as possible. At last it came to light, and Philip had made a funny noise in his throat like something trying not to explode. It was a black Kodak camera, just like the one we had so often gazed at in the windows of the chemist shop. "Philip," I squealed, "you got it, you've got it." And then I stopped short, for of course it was my turn now, and Dad had chosen a flat, hard parcel and was handing it out to me. Everyone crowded around to watch as I, unlike Philip, tore the wrappings off as quickly as possible and gave a little gasp of delight and went pink all over. It was my own picture, but not a crumpled, torn postcard one. It was a big, beautiful copy in a carved wooden frame for me to hang over my bed and keep forever. In fact, it was just like the one in Mr. Robinson's study. The grown-ups, they opened their presents after that, and it seemed as pleased as we were. They were mostly handmade things, and we were very proud of them. Wooden bookends for Uncle Peter, a purse for Aunt Margaret, a blotter for Dad, and a hot water bottle cover for Mom. Terry's mother was presented with a highly colored, embroidered handkerchief case, which she admired very much indeed. Of course, there were other presents too, but these were the main ones. And by the time everyone had opened everything, Minnie was fast asleep in Terry's mother's arms, and Lizzie in her new green dress was nodding against the wall. So they were carried off and tucked in. Philip and I helped clean up, and then Philip and Dad sat on the sofa and looked at the bird book together for about the 10th time. But it was different now because the camera lay on Philip's lap and they were planning the photos. I wandered off by myself with my picture in my arm and climbed the stairs. I wanted to curl up behind the curtain on the landing windowsill and look out on the Christmas stars and snow and listen to the bells that were ringing from the church nearby. But when I reached my hiding place, I found that Mom had got there first. And that was even better than being alone, so I climbed onto her lap and held up my picture because I wanted us to look at it together. "Isn't it beautiful?" I asked. "Yes," replied Mom. "But what made you love it so especially, Ruth? Tell me about it." So I told her rather shyly, and she listened, looking out over the snow until I finished. "And it's not only me," I ended up. "He found me first, but after that he found Philip, and then Terry's mother, and then he found Terry too, and he carried him right home, Mummy. Sometimes I wonder if he found Aunt Margaret too. At least I think she had forgotten about him a bit, and when she saw the picture it reminded her of him again." "Yes, I think it did," answered Mom. "Do you know, Ruth, I also want to learn about him. Sometimes far away in India I used to pray that somehow you would get to know about him, but I never felt I knew enough to teach you myself." I looked up quickly. "Did you really?" I exclaimed. "Then I suppose that's why it all happened. You sort of sent him to us." "I'm glad it's like that because it makes it even nicer than it was before." I laid my head against her shoulder and we sat quietly looking out, and I think I nearly fell asleep, and in a half-dreaming way I saw us all found and following through the green fields in Terry's picture. Mom and Dad, Auntie and Uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson and the twins, their tiny feet stumbling through the daisies, old Mr. Tandy with his flock behind him, and Terry's mother, Philip, and me, Alfie and Lizzie and Minnie, because I had promised to tell them all about the picture in the morning. And in front of us all, the Good Shepherd, with the wounded hands leading us on to a land far away where Terry was, perfectly strong and happy. The end. That was a good book, and I hope you really enjoyed that. We're going to start, on Tuesday, we're going to start a new book by Patricia St. John, and Lord willing, we're going to be reading The Treasures in the Snow. I think you're going to like that book too. I love you, and I'm praying for you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.